I never thought I'd be the guy sitting alone, staring at the wall, wondering how everything went wrong. My name is Jake, and I was married to a woman named Lisa for 7 years. We had what I thought was a solid relationship, built on trust, shared dreams, and the kind of love that makes you feel invincible. Or at least, I thought so until I started noticing the little things. It all began with subtle changes in Lisa's behavior. She started working late more often, claiming she was busy with her job as a marketing executive. I remember the first time it happened. She came home past midnight giggling and smelling like a different perfume. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, saying it was just a new scent from a coworker. I wanted to believe her, so I did. But over the next few months, those late nights became increasingly frequent. Even her texts seemed different. Her phone would buzz with notifications, but she'd quickly dismiss the alerts without a glance. Then, one fateful afternoon, while searching for my jacket, I stumbled upon a small envelope tucked away in a drawer. It was a hotel receipt, dated a week prior. I recognized the hotel's name. It was a fancy place in town where couples splurge for romantic getaways. My heart dropped. I opened it and my hands shook as I read the names listed on the receipt. Lisa's name was there, along with another name, Ryan. My stomach churned. Ryan was a local motivational speaker, known for his flashy seminars and self-help books, and I always knew Lisa had been a fan, but this was different. The sick feeling in my gut twisted tighter. I spent the next few days gathering evidence, trying to convince myself that I was being paranoid. I checked her social media, her emails, anything I could find, and every piece of information only heightened my suspicions. The way she spoke about Ryan, how mesmerized she seemed when she talked about his seminars, made my skin crawl. I remember her saying once, "Jake, he has such a way with words. He's transforming lives." Little did I know, she was probably transforming something else entirely. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted her one evening when she walked in after another late night. The anger bubbled to the surface as I slammed the envelope on the dining table. "What's this, Lisa?" I demanded, my voice laced with disbelief. She froze, the blood draining from her face. "Jake, I can explain," she stammered, her eyes darting away as if looking for an escape. She tried to play it off as a business trip to discuss marketing strategies with Ryan, but as she spoke, her excuses became more ridiculous. "He's just a mentor, Jake. Nothing more," she insisted, a hint of desperation creeping into her tone. But every word felt like a stab, each lie more potent than the last. I felt a rage inside me bloom, mixing with betrayal and pain. How could she stand there looking so guilty yet trying to convince me of her innocence? "Mentor, you expect me to believe that?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the empty room. "You're lying to my face, Lisa." I found the receipt. Her expression shifted, and for a moment I saw her facade crack, revealing the guilt underneath. She tried to deny everything, but the truth was already hanging in the air between us like a thick fog, suffocating any remnants of trust. As she continued to ramble on, my mind was racing. I felt like I was in a bad dream that I couldn't wake up from. I couldn't believe this was happening to me. I had given her my heart, my loyalty, and she had betrayed me for some motivational speaker. My chest tightened and I found it hard to breathe. I had to gather my thoughts, but all I could feel was a storm of confusion and hurt. That night I barely slept. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, doubt, and disbelief. I couldn't wrap my head around how the woman I loved could do this to me. I felt lost, betrayed in the worst possible way, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. I realized something needed to change, but what? How could I possibly face the world after this revelation? I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let this go unanswered. The days that followed were a blur. I walked through life like a ghost, nodding along with conversations and pretending to be engaged, all while my mind was consumed with thoughts of Lisa and Ryan. I felt like a puppet whose strings been cut, floating aimlessly through the motions of daily life. Every time I glanced at Lisa, who was desperately trying to salvage what was left of our marriage, I was reminded of her betrayal. The tension in our home was palpable, and I knew we were teetering on a precipice. That weekend, I decided to dig deeper. I was determined to gather evidence that would expose the truth of Lisa's infidelity. I began tailing her, playing the part of a supportive husband while secretly keeping an eye on her. At first, I felt ridiculous. The thought of spying on my wife was something I had never imagined doing, but I had to know for sure. It was a Saturday when I finally caught her in the act. I parked a few blocks away from the local coffee shop where I knew she met Ryan every other Saturday for business. My heart raced as I watched her stroll in, looking beautiful and carefree, completely unaware that I was lurking just outside. I waited, keeping my composure, but every passing second felt like an eternity. After what felt like an hour, I finally saw him walk in, Ryan with his charming smile and slick-back hair. He had an aura that screamed confidence, the kind of guy who could sell ice to an Eskimo. I watched them greet each other and it twisted something deep inside me. The way she leaned in, laughing at something he said, made my blood boil. I wanted to storm in there and confront them both, but I needed to stay calm. I had to think this through. After a few moments, I saw them sit down and pore over what looked like a bunch of papers. No doubt marketing strategies, or so I told myself to keep from losing it. But as I continued to watch, the atmosphere shifted. Their laughter grew louder, more intimate, and it was clear this was not a simple business meeting. I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures, hoping to capture something that would cement my suspicions. Then it happened. As I zoomed in on their table, I saw Lisa reach out to touch Ryan's arm, her fingers lingering just a moment too long. I felt my heart drop. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed into the coffee shop, my blood pumping, ready to confront them, but just as I pushed the door open, something stopped me. I paused, hidden just outside the entrance, and listened. "I can't keep sneaking around like this, Lisa," Ryan said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "What if Jake finds out?" "Don't be ridiculous," Lisa shot back, her tone dismissive. "He won't. He's too busy with his work to even notice what I'm doing. Plus, it's not like we're having sex or anything, it's just a little fun." My heart ached at her words. It was like she was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince him. Just a little fun. Those words echoed in my mind, twisting the knife deeper. I wanted to burst in and scream at her, but I held myself back. I needed to maintain control. I quietly left the coffee shop, feeling a mix of fury and disbelief. I had never felt so powerless in my life. How could she belittle our relationship like that? I was struggling to keep my composure as I replayed her words in my head. I had to come up with a plan. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I returned home, heart racing as I plotted my next move. I wasn't just going to confront Lisa again. I was going to make sure Ryan paid for what he had taken from me. It became clear that exposing him would satisfy my need for revenge, but it would also serve as a means to reclaim my own dignity. I needed to unmask the phony facade of a man who built his career on lies. That night, while Lisa lay asleep, I started gathering information on Ryan. I spent hours researching his seminars, watching videos of his motivational speeches, and reading through his online presence. The more I delved into his world, the more I saw just how manipulative he was. He thrived on people's vulnerabilities, using their trust to sell them empty promises and overpriced courses that led nowhere. I was infuriated. How dare he prey on people and use my wife as part of his sick game? The pieces began to fall into place. If Ryan was a fraud, then exposing him could not only end his career but would also strike at Lisa. I felt a sense of purpose rising within me. I would gather evidence and confront him in a way that would hurt him most, publicly. I would take away his audience and show everyone what a fraud he truly was. I spent the next few days developing a plan that felt like it was straight out of a movie. I would collect the evidence I had, document Lisa's interactions with him, and then reach out to those who had attended his seminars. I would expose his lies, and I would make sure his career as a motivational speaker came crashing down. The thought of Lisa's reaction fueled my determination. She would finally see just how wrong she was about him and how badly she had hurt me. The time for revenge was approaching, and I was ready to execute my plan. I just needed to remain patient, gather the evidence, and strike when the moment was right. Little did I know that my quest for revenge would lead me down a path I never expected, one filled with unexpected twists and consequences. As the days turned into a week, I became consumed with my plan. I had a purpose now, something to focus on beyond the pain Lisa had caused me. I started assembling my evidence against Ryan, documenting every interaction I could find. I created a detailed timeline of Lisa's meetings with him, tracking the dates and times when they met and comparing it to the receipts I had discovered. I even set up a fake social media account to gain access to some of the groups where his followers congregated. The more I uncovered, the more furious I became. Ryan was not just a motivational speaker, he was a master manipulator. His posts were filled with cliches and recycled self-help jargon that preyed on the insecurities of others. I started reaching out to attendees of his seminars, using my fake account to pose as someone interested in his courses. I found former attendees who felt cheated and disillusioned, people who had spent money on his programs without seeing any real change in their lives. They were eager to share their stories, and I began to gather testimonials that would expose his fraudulent empire. One afternoon, as I was sifting through emails and social media messages, I received a notification from one of his former seminar attendees. Her name was Sarah, and she had attended multiple workshops led by Ryan. She told me she had spent thousands of dollars on his courses, only to find they were filled with empty promises. I asked if she would be willing to go public, and to my surprise, she agreed. It felt like I was building an army of truth-tellers, and with each person who joined me, my resolve grew stronger. I was also meticulous in documenting Lisa's continued interactions with Ryan. I followed her to a networking event she had told me about, where I knew he would be the keynote speaker. I felt a mix of trepidation and excitement as I prepared for the confrontation I had been planning. I had bought a ticket under a fake name, determined to get in and see firsthand how this charlatan worked his magic on an audience. The night of the event arrived. I wore a disguise to blend in, a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses shielding my eyes. As I entered the venue, I felt a rush of adrenaline. The room was packed with eager faces, all looking up at Ryan as he stood on stage, charismatic and animated, feeding off the energy of the crowd. I watched as he spun tales of triumph and transformation, weaving his words like a master craftsman, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. How many of these people were buying into his lies? As the event progressed, I filmed snippets of his speech, knowing they would serve as evidence of his manipulation. I could see the way he moved through the crowd, charming people, making them feel special while raking in their money. It was sickening. But then something unexpected happened. Lisa was in the crowd, completely captivated by him. I watched as she cheered and clapped, her smile lighting up her face. Each laugh she shared with those around her felt like a dagger piercing my heart. When Ryan opened the floor for questions, I seized my opportunity. I raised my hand, my heart pounding in my chest. "Ryan, can you explain your qualifications for being a motivational speaker?" I asked, my voice steady, though I felt my anger bubbling beneath the surface. He flashed a charming smile, completely unfazed, and began to recite a long list of accolades and personal achievements. But I wasn't finished. "And how do you justify the high costs of your seminars, given the testimonials of those who say they've walked away without any real value?" The excitement in the room shifted to confusion as people began to murmur. I could see Lisa's expression falter as she realized I was there. Ryan's facade slipped for just a moment, and he was no longer the confident speaker. "These are personal transformations," he replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his tone. "Each journey is unique. My chance had come, and I wasn't backing down. But when does it become exploitation? When you're profiting off vulnerable people. Because there are those who have shared their experiences with me, people who feel cheated." I glanced over at Lisa, who looked horrified and embarrassed, her eyes wide as she processed what was happening. A few attendees began to nod in agreement, and I felt a swell of empowerment. The momentum shifted, and more questions began to surface. I had ignited a discussion, and I could feel the tide turning against him. People were starting to see him for what he really was, a fraud. Afterward, I made sure to speak with some of the attendees individually, gathering their stories and pushing them to join me in exposing Ryan publicly. I shared what I had learned about his manipulative tactics, and each person echoed the same sentiments, their disappointment palpable. There was strength in numbers, and I was building a coalition of people who would back me up when the time came to take action. When I returned home that night, I was exhausted but exhilarated. Lisa was waiting for me, her expression a mix of anger and confusion. "What were you doing there, Jake?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "You had no right to confront him like that." "Had no right?" I shot back, my pulse racing. "You're the one who's been lying. You think I wouldn't find out? I saw the way you looked at him. You're infatuated with a liar." She opened her mouth to respond, but I could see the guilt etched on her face. The weight of our conversation hung thick in the air. "I realize I've made mistakes," she finally admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "But you don't understand what I was trying to do." I stared at her, disbelief coursing through me. "What were you trying to do, Lisa? What could possibly justify this?" "I thought I could learn from him, to grow our brand, to be better at my job. I didn't mean to fall for him, I swear." Her excuses felt hollow, like a flimsy bridge over a chasm of lies. But for me, the moment was clear. I had a mission now, and it wasn't just about revenge. It was about truth, about reclaiming my dignity. I had to expose Ryan, not only for my sake, but for those he had manipulated. As the days passed, I worked tirelessly to finalize my plan, preparing to take Ryan down in the most public way possible. I would reveal him for the fraud he truly was, and in doing so, I would make sure Lisa and I would have to confront the reality of our crumbling marriage. There was no turning back now. With each passing day, my plan to expose Ryan and reclaim my sense of self took shape. I had gathered enough evidence and testimonials to build a powerful case against him, and I was finally ready to take action. The time had come for me to go public, and I decided that a local news outlet would be an ideal first step. They loved stories about frauds and scams, especially ones involving self-proclaimed gurus like Ryan. I spent hours drafting a detailed letter, outlining everything I had discovered: the hotel receipts, the testimonials from victims, and the evidence of his manipulative tactics. I included screenshots of his social media posts filled with empty promises, as well as the footage I had captured at the seminar. I knew that if I presented a clear picture of Ryan's deception, the media would be interested. After sending my letter to the local news station, I felt a rush of anticipation mixed with anxiety. I had no idea if they would take me seriously or if my efforts would amount to anything. But I was determined to see it through. I had worked too hard to gather this evidence to back down now. While waiting for a response, I attempted to navigate my strained relationship with Lisa. Every conversation felt like walking on eggshells. She was still trying to convince me that Ryan was nothing more than a mentor, and I could see the guilt in her eyes. Each time she brought him up, I felt anger bubbling beneath the surface. It was clear she was torn between her infatuation and the reality of her actions. One night after a particularly tense dinner, I sat Lisa down. "We need to talk about this," I said, my voice firm but calm. "You're still defending him. Why?" "Because, Jake, I thought I could learn something from him. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I swear I was just trying to improve my career," she pleaded, her hands trembling. "Your career? You think this is just about your career? You've betrayed me, Lisa. You crossed a line that you can't come back from." I know," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "But it didn't mean anything. You have to believe me." Her desperation stirred something within me, anger mixed with a hint of sympathy. I could see how torn she was, but I couldn't let her off the hook. "Believe you? After everything? How can I trust anything you say?" Her silence spoke volumes. I could feel the cracks in our relationship widening, a chasm that would be difficult to bridge. I had to remind myself that my priority was to expose Ryan, but I also knew I could let Lisa's actions go unaddressed. A few days later, I received a call from the news station. They were interested in my story and wanted to meet me for an interview. I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as I prepared for the meeting. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I would finally have a platform to share the truth about Ryan and what he had done. On the day of the interview, I arrived early, pacing in the lobby as I waited. I went over my notes one last time, rehearsing everything I wanted to say. When I was ushered into the studio, I felt a rush of adrenaline. The reporters were friendly, and as they began to ask me questions, I found my voice. I spoke passionately about Ryan, detailing the evidence I had gathered and the impact he had on people's lives, including my own. As I shared my story, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I was finally taking control of my narrative, reclaiming my power. When the interview wrapped up, they assured me that they would follow up with the evidence I had provided and investigate further. Returning home, I felt hopeful, but that hope quickly turned to dread when I saw Lisa standing in the living room, her face pale. "Jake, I saw the promo for the segment. You can't do this." "Why not? He's a fraud. People need to know." I snapped, the weight of the moment crashing down on me again. "You're going to ruin him," she shot back, her voice rising. "He could lose everything, and what about us? Do you think this is helping our marriage?" I was taken aback by her reaction. "Us? You're the one who threw our marriage away for him. Do you really care more about him than the truth?" "Of course I care about the truth, but you're going to destroy his life, and then what? What do you think that will do to me?" Her desperation was palpable. I could see she was wrestling with guilt, not just over her affair but over the fallout of my actions. "I'm not trying to destroy anyone's life, Lisa. I'm trying to prevent him from hurting more people like you." She fell silent, staring at the floor, and I knew I had struck a nerve. "If you want to be with him, then just go. But I won't stand by and let him ruin more lives," I said, my voice steady. "What if it's not over between us?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Then prove it. Help me expose him. Help yourself by owning up to what you've done." The tension hung in the air, and for a moment I genuinely thought we might find a way to move forward together. But deep down, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. In the coming days, the news segment aired, and to my surprise, it gained traction. People began reaching out to me, sharing their own experiences with Ryan. A Facebook group was created for those who had been affected by his seminars, and I became a central figure in the movement. As the pressure mounted, Ryan's response was predictable. He released a statement claiming I was a disgruntled attendee trying to ruin his reputation. "Jake is just upset and trying to get attention," he said in dismissive tones. He clearly didn't understand the value of what I offer. I felt my anger reignite. Instead of backing down, I decided to confront him directly. I reached out to arrange a public debate, something that could unmask his lies once and for all. I wanted to challenge him face to face in front of an audience, to give the people he had deceived a chance to see the truth. I set the date for the debate and began preparing my arguments. I focused on the facts, the testimonials, the evidence of his manipulation. I knew this was my chance to take him down, not just for me, but for all the people he had hurt. But as the date approached, the tension between Lisa and me escalated. She felt torn between supporting me and wanting to defend Ryan. I could sense her internal struggle, and it added to the stress of the impending confrontation. But I couldn't let her emotions sway me. I had a mission, and I was ready to see it through. The night of the debate, I arrived at the venue, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The audience buzzed with anticipation, and I took a deep breath, reminding myself why I was there. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about exposing the truth and putting an end to Ryan's manipulation once and for all. I stepped onto the stage, ready to face the man who had turned my life upside down and made a mockery of the love I once cherished. The stakes had never been higher, and I was prepared to fight. As I stepped onto the stage, I scanned the audience, feeling an electric mix of anxiety and determination. The venue was packed, filled with people eager to see this showdown between myself and Ryan. I caught a glimpse of Lisa sitting in the front row, her expression a cocktail of concern and defiance. I knew she was wrestling with her feelings about Ryan, but this was a moment I couldn't let her distract me from. The moderator introduced us, and as I took my seat opposite Ryan, I felt a wave of adrenaline wash over me. He sat there, exuding confidence, with that smug smile on his face that had charmed so many. But I was ready. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and I was determined to expose the truth. The debate kicked off, and the moderator opened the floor with questions aimed at both of us. When Ryan spoke, he flaunted his usual charm, reciting his rehearsed lines about personal growth and transformation. But I could see cracks in his facade as some audience members began to murmur and exchange glances, clearly not buying into his smooth talk. When it was my turn to respond, I leaned forward, ready to seize the moment. Ryan, you talk a lot about empowerment and transformation, but what about the people you've exploited for your profit? What do you say to the individuals who have attended your seminars and walked away feeling cheated? His confident demeanor faltered slightly. Success is subjective, Jake. Not everyone can grasp the concepts I teach. It's about personal responsibility. Personal responsibility. I shot back. Is it personal responsibility when people pay thousands of dollars for your seminars, only to leave with nothing to show for it? I've spoken to countless individuals who feel they've been deceived, who were promised transformation but received nothing but empty platitudes. The tension in the room thickened as the audience began to react, some nodding in agreement while others looked uncertain. I could feel the tide turning in my favor. As the debate continued, I unveiled the evidence I had gathered, the hotel receipts, testimonials, and a selection of video clips from his seminars that highlighted his manipulative tactics. I aimed to paint a picture of a man who preyed on the vulnerable and exploited their hopes and dreams for his gain. Ryan tried to dismiss my evidence, but I could see the frustration creeping onto his face. "You're just a bitter man trying to tear others down," he exclaimed, a hint of desperation in his voice. "Bitter? No, I'm fighting for those you've hurt, Ryan. I'm giving a voice to the people who believed in you and were let down." I gestured to the audience, who were now fully engaged, their eyes darting back and forth as they absorbed the unfolding drama. With each passing moment, I felt more empowered. I had finally stepped into my truth, and I was taking back my narrative. As I looked at Lisa in the audience, I saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. Perhaps she was beginning to realize the extent of Ryan's manipulation and the consequences of her choices. Towards the end of the debate, the moderator opened the floor to questions from the audience. Hands shot up, and I could see people eager to voice their concerns. One woman stood up, her voice trembling. "Ryan, I attended your seminar last year and I spent over $2,000. I felt like I was sold a dream, but I didn't gain anything. What do you have to say to me?" Ryan's smile faded momentarily as he struggled to formulate a response. "Every journey is unique, and not everyone benefits in the same way. You must take responsibility for your own progress." The crowd reacted, murmurs of discontent rippling through the room. I saw the opportunity to strike while the iron was hot. "You see, that's the problem, folks. He's deflecting responsibility onto you. It's not about personal failure, it's about the lies he tells to make money." I could feel the energy shift in the room, and it invigorated me. Another audience member raised their hand. "Why should we trust anything you say, Ryan? You've been called out for your empty promises before. It seems like you only care about the money." With each question, Ryan's confidence continued to crumble. The audience was no longer just passive observers. They were engaged, demanding accountability. I had ignited a fire, and I could feel it spreading. As the debate concluded, Ryan's final remarks felt desperate and defensive. He attempted to regain control by claiming that I was merely a failed attendee, ignoring the growing evidence against him. But it was too late. The audience had heard the truth, and they were no longer swayed by his empty rhetoric. When the event wrapped up, the moderator thanked us both and encouraged everyone to continue the conversation outside. I stepped off the stage, heart racing, and as I did, I was met by a throng of individuals eager to share their experiences with Ryan. They were grateful for my courage in standing up against him, and I felt a sense of camaraderie with them. As I scanned the crowd, I spotted Lisa making her way toward me, her face a mix of admiration and uncertainty. "Jake, that was incredible," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea he was so manipulative. I didn't see it until now." "Do you understand how serious this is, Lisa?" I replied, my voice steady but carrying the weight of my emotions. "You were caught up in his lies, and that's not something we can just brush aside." "I know," she said, tears welling in her eyes. I'm so sorry for everything. I thought it was just harmless admiration, but I see now how foolish I've been." Her sincerity struck a chord within me, and for the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was a path to rebuilding our relationship, but it would take honesty and commitment from both of us. "Let's take it one step at a time," I replied, recognizing that healing would be a long journey but feeling willing to try. "But you need to understand that I can't go back to what we had before. We have to be better." As I left the venue that night, I felt a sense of empowerment that I hadn't experienced in years. I had faced my demons, confronted a manipulative fraud, and stood up for those who had suffered in silence. I still had a long road ahead of me, both in my quest for justice against Ryan and in mending my relationship with Lisa. But I was ready to face whatever came next. I had learned that standing up for the truth was the first step in reclaiming my life. And as for Ryan, I knew this was just the beginning of my fight to expose him and ensure he could no longer prey on the vulnerable. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and I was determined to see them grow until his empire was dismantled. The battle wasn't over yet, and I was ready to give it everything I had. In the weeks that followed the debate, I threw myself into my mission to expose Ryan. The interview had sparked a movement, and people from all walks of life began reaching out to share their stories about his manipulative tactics. My initial letter to the local news station had opened the floodgates, and I realized I wasn't just fighting for my own dignity. I was standing up for countless others who had been manipulated by his charm. I collaborated with journalists who were eager to investigate further. We organized a series of interviews with former attendees and gathered evidence that painted a clear picture of Ryan's deceptive practices. The more we uncovered, the more I felt a sense of purpose. This was not just about revenge. It was about accountability, holding someone responsible for the pain they had inflicted on others. Meanwhile, my relationship with Lisa was undergoing a slow transformation. It was clear that she was genuinely remorseful, and she began to take active steps to distance herself from Ryan. She attended support groups for those who had been manipulated by charismatic figures, and she sought counseling to work through her feelings and the impact of her affair. It wasn't easy for either of us, but I felt a flicker of hope that perhaps we could rebuild something stronger. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I turned to her and said, "I need you to understand how much trust was broken. I'm willing to work on things, but it requires both of us to be fully committed." "I understand, Jake," she replied, her voice steady. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. You deserve that much." As our conversations became more open and honest, I began to see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with. We started to communicate more effectively, discussing our feelings and fears rather than skirting around them. It was a long road, but we were both willing to walk it together. The culmination of my efforts came when the local news aired a comprehensive investigative piece on Ryan. They highlighted the testimonials from former attendees, showcased evidence of his manipulative strategies, and confronted him directly about the allegations. Watching the segment air felt surreal. I had put my heart and soul into exposing him, and now it was finally coming to light. As the report unfolded, I marveled at how the audience's perception of Ryan shifted. The comments filled with disbelief and anger flooded social media platforms, expressing shock that someone so charming could be so deceitful. It was a moment of triumph, but it also felt bittersweet. I had fought hard for justice, yet I couldn't shake the emotional residue of the betrayal. In the aftermath, Ryan's empire began to crumble. His seminars dwindled in attendance, sponsors pulled out, and the backlash forced him into hiding. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had succeeded in my quest to hold him accountable, but it was also a reminder of the pain I had endured. I would never forget the hurt Lisa's affair had caused, nor would I forget the man who had exploited our trust. As the dust began to settle, I found myself reflecting on everything I had learned through this harrowing experience. I had discovered the depths of betrayal, but also the strength of resilience. I realized that trust could be rebuilt, but it required honesty, commitment, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. One rainy afternoon, Lisa and I found ourselves sitting on our porch, sipping coffee and watching the droplets race down the window. It was a simple moment, but it felt profound. "You know," I said, "I didn't just want revenge. I wanted to find my voice again, and I think I did that." "I'm proud of you, Jake," she replied, her eyes shining with sincerity. "You didn't just stand up for yourself, you stood up for so many others, and I want to be better for you, for us." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared journey enveloping us. I could see the path ahead was still fraught with challenges, but I felt a newfound sense of hope. Together, we could confront whatever came next. In the months that followed, we continued to repair our relationship. We attended couples therapy, working through the complexities of trust and forgiveness. It wasn't an easy road, but with each passing day, we grew more connected and committed to one another. I also began speaking publicly about the lessons I had learned, using my experience to help others find their voice and reclaim their lives. I started a blog dedicated to sharing stories of resilience and healing, creating a platform for those who had faced similar challenges. The more I shared, the more I felt empowered. Ultimately, I learned that life is unpredictable. Betrayal can shake the very foundation of our lives, but it can also lead to growth, understanding, and the possibility of redemption. I had faced my fears, confronted a manipulative fraud, and emerged stronger on the other side. As I look back on this journey, I realize that while the scars of betrayal may never fully fade, they can be transformed into lessons. I am not defined by what happened to me, but by how I chose to respond. And in that response, I found my voice, reclaimed my dignity, and forged a new path forward, not just for myself, but for the ones I love.